Hello Phoenixes, this is Liam here with my crafting idea for Ashes of Creation. This is not a video of what I speculate the crafting system to be like in Ashes of Creation, or to say that if the crafting system isn't what I'm about to present, that the system will be a poor system. This is simply a crafting idea that I put together to see if players would like crafting in an MMORPG, in this case Ashes of Creation, to have meaning. For far too long, crafting in MMORPGs has always been something that's done on the side, done because you're bored, or leveled simply to make passive income. This system would change all of that, and I know that's a very bold statement to make. So let me put my money where my mouth is and show you why. Side note, I will not be covering all of the artisan professions that we know up to this point. The reason I'm doing that is because if I put the entire system out there, it is far easier to have it stolen. This video is going to cover the comparisons between a few specialized and then general artisan professions. In our case, miner versus gatherer, blacksmith versus processor, and swordsmith versus weaponsmith. Also, the charts you will see from this point forward don't reflect exactly what a player would see in game. This is all concept. Let's begin. The miner. This is someone who is dedicating their time to mastering the ore that they gather in the open world. I know it doesn't sound very appealing, but don't be too quick to judge any profession within this system. This is the leveling chart for miner. I know it may seem daunting or confusing to look at at first, but I'll break it down here within the next few minutes. All you need to know is that in order to go from green to orange, you would need to finish all the green prerequisites. This is the crafting game for the miner. The minigame would consist of waiting for a triangle to revolve around a dial and pressing the proper button in a certain highlighted area. In this case, we're using red and green since they're complementary and easy to see. The green area location would differ between a 5, 6, or 7 second interval, making the average hit time 6 seconds, at least for iron, which we're using as a tier 1 miner gathering material. Also, it would take 5 successful hits per gathering of iron ore. The reason I went with this system is to make it a lot harder for players to make bots so that they can level up crafting while they're AFK asleep or while they're just AFK in general. You'll also see that in just about all the professions that we're going to be covering today. I do not believe in AFK crafting, nor do I think players that would want a meaningful crafting system for players to have the ability to just craft while they're asleep, especially if they're going to be crafting this amazing epic gear. Now that we've covered the crafting game, let's get back to the nitty-gritty. On the example on the left here, you'll see light fragments and then that they're reagents for attack speed. Now we'll cover how that works. Each time a miner gathers from mineable ore, in this case, we're going to use the tier 1, which was iron, they're going to receive all fragment types each time they successfully mine that ore, as well as the base ore itself. Different fragments represent their different reagents that would be used by a specialized processor. In this case, a blacksmith. Now, of course, there's those number crunchers out there that want to know exactly how much time it's going to take before they can move to the next tier of mining in this case. I've already done the math for you. It's a 450 minute total, approximate, divided by 5 ranks, which is 90 minutes per rank. 2 gatherings per minute. Math done there is 60 seconds in a minute divided by 5 hit system times 6 second average mini game. 60 divided by 30 is 2 per minute. 90 minutes per rank times 2 gatherings a minute equals 180 successful gatherings per rank. 180 successful gatherings per rank times 5 ranks equals 900 successful gatherings in order to unlock the ability to mine, in this case, Celosium ore. Again, that's just a name filler. I just pulled that off of a random ore name generating website. Now we'll go over the gatherer. This is someone who could gather trees, ore, herbs out in the world, seeds, or anything that's gatherable in the world in the Ashes of Creation. Now that sounds overpowered when compared to the miner who can really only mine ore and level up through mining, but give me a chance to explain how, in the long run, there's a large difference between the specialist and the jack of all trades. This is the chart I'm using for the Gatherer. Now obviously it does not cover everything that's going to be available in Ashes of Creation, but that's also because we have limited information as to what is exactly available in terms of the gathering professions in Ashes of Creation. There's supposed to be a lot of them, so either way, this is a limited system, and for concept it's a lot easier to use. So what we have is we have different gathering games for each of the professions, because we don't want it to be the same thing for every type of gathering or any kind of profession. It shouldn't be the same. Now obviously if a gatherer is going to go mining, it would be the same gathering game that a miner would have, because you're mining. They would be able to do lumberjacking, they'd be able to mine, they'd be able to do herbalism, and they'd also be able to do some foraging. Now let's cover what gatherers can expect when compared against a specialist. Example, you have mining and then the materials for armor and weaponsmiths here. But each time a gatherer gathers material, they are only able to acquire the general material type. Example, a miner can mine 2 of each fragment type each time they mine iron ore. A gatherer, however, would only be able to gather iron ore, no matter how high their gathering level is. They could be at a tier 5 gathering level. They will not see 1 fragment of that iron ore. The reason I went with this kind of system is to really make a miner special compared to someone who's just... But you basically could look at it like someone who's just hitting a rock to get parts of a rock, versus someone who actually has the eye, someone who's studied and dedicated, understands, hey, this is iron ore, and there are unique parts within this rock that someone who's just bashing the rock to go bring it back to town would know nothing about. Now we're back to the how do we gather higher quality materials as a gatherer if we don't want to be a specialist. Well, it would be about a 452 minute total, again with the numbers that I have to work with in terms of how many professions we know up to this point. We're just using 4 so far. So 452 approximately divided by 4 types of materials equals 113 minutes per type of material. 2 gatherings per minute, again using the same system as the miner there, is a 113 minutes per rank times 2 gatherings per minute is 226 successful gatherings per type of material gathered. 226 successful gatherings per type of material times 4 types equals 904 gatherings of the general material type in order to get to the next higher quality material. This means that you would have to do 226 successful gatherings of mining, lumberjack, herbalism, and foraging, just to make that very clear. It wouldn't be, oh, I'm going to do 400, I'm going to do half of them on mining, and I'm going to do half of them on herbalism. It doesn't work that way. If you are going to be a gatherer, you do need to at least have this knowledge of all the types of material you can gather before you can proceed leveling up to the next type of higher quality material gathering. Now we're going to migrate to the processing artisans. We'll begin here with the blacksmith. He would work best in conjunction with the miner since he specializes in what the miner specializes in gathering in processing. Now the blacksmith would also be able to use the general iron ore that a gatherer would also be able to bring to the table. As you can see, this is the blacksmith's leveling tree. It looks very similar to the gatherer and even the miner's leveling tree, and that's because they're very similar. You see those 6 reagents that we were talking about before in terms of the miner. There's also the general component, the iron ingot, that you see from the gatherer, which obviously the miner can get as well. Let's move forward. Now for the fun part, the smelting game. This minigame will consist of keeping the heated ore or fragments within the kiln at a certain temperature through pumping a bellow. Pumping the bellow will increase the temperature temporarily. There will be 4 sessions of successful smelting. Stage 1, 45 seconds of temperature control, and then pouring out the hot metal, first checkpoint. Repeating from stage 2 and 3 until you get to stage 4. Stage 4, 45 seconds of temperature control, and then 15 seconds of pouring out the hot metal and cooling it into either an ingot or a shard. This will be automatic because it will be noted as the success of all 4 stages combined, causing it to be a successful smelting. If the temperature is too cold or too hot for more than 5 seconds, you will semi-fail the smelting process. You can start back at your last checkpoint, but it will cost you half of the necessary materials to continue, rounded up for odd number ratios. Examples of smelting. After a finished smelting game of iron ore, the blacksmith would create 1 iron ingot. After a smelting game of light iron fragments, the blacksmith would then create 1 light iron shard. Now you're probably wondering, how would you actually get better at smelting? You were talking about ratios before. Well, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 refers to the ratio of materials needed to craft one of that processed material. Example, at rank 1 of smelting iron ingots, you would need 5 iron ore to create 1 iron ingot, hence making it a 5-to-1 ratio. After 4 successful smelts of a 5-to-1 ratio, you would then only need 4 iron ore to smelt 1 iron fragment, hence the 4-to-1 ratio decrease. Now keep in mind, these ratios and decreases in ratios and amounts of successful smelts to decrease the ratio would only apply to tier 1. The higher the tier, the more successful smelts needed to decrease the ratio. Now for the number crunching. How long would it take to unlock smelting for tier 2? It is a 455-minute total, approximately, divided by 7 types of material, equaling 65 minutes per type of material. The crafting game would be 3 minutes and 15 seconds, or 3.25 minutes per smelting, times 4 smelts to decrease ratio, equaling 13 minutes per rank of material type. 455-minute total divided by 3.25 minutes per smelting equals 140 successful smelts of iron to unlock tier 2 smelting. Now we're at the processor. This is just like the gatherer, who is a jack of all, but in this case, for the processor, he'd be the jack of all for processing materials. Like a blacksmith, a general processor has the ability to decrease the ratio for processing gathered materials. The main difference is that a general processor will never have the ability to process specialized materials. Now again, you ask, how do you rank up what we can process in terms of a general processor? The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 again refers to the ratio of materials needed to craft one of that processed material. We're going to go back to the iron ingots. At rank 1 of smelting iron ingots, you would need 5 iron ore to create 1 iron ingot, back to the 5-to-1 ratio, and after 4 successful smelts of iron ore of a 5-to-1 ratio, you would then only need 4. It would work the same way for processing wood, herbs, or anything like that. Now, of course, we want to get to the point where we're able to upgrade what we can process. So we ask how to unlock higher quality processings. It'd be a 450-minute total divided by 5 types of processed material equals 90 minutes per types of processed material. 90 minutes per type of processed material divided by a 5 ratio decreases equals 18 minutes per ratio rank increase. 18 minutes per ratio rank increase divided by 4 successful processing attempts equals a 4-minute and 30-second processing game for a general processor. The same rules apply for a general processor as it would for a gatherer. You would need to process all types of materials before you can increase the ability to process higher end materials. Now we've made it to the final step, the crafting. In this case, we'll start with the swordsmith first, one who has dedicated their entire time of artisan to learning how to forge the perfect swords. Here we see the swordsmith's tree. For those who are paying extra attention, you'll see that there's only 6 types of increases, when on the blacksmiths there is 7. The 7th one on the blacksmith was the general material creation. A swordsmith is able to make a general sword, but it will not increase their swordsmithing level. They are going to be specialists who make specialty weapons, so the only way to level up specialty is through specialty. This is the crafting game of the swordsmith. This minigame would consist of clicking a red area as it comes up. On the right you see 5 red areas numbered 1 through 5 on the sword. It would be somewhat resemblant of this. The minigame would consist of clicking the red area as it comes up and hammering it. It would be RNG for how many times it would need to be hit, aka hammered, in order to remove it. The higher the tier quality of the weapon is, the more hammering would need to be done. So as you level up in your craft, the more difficult it becomes to craft each weapon. If 3 red areas are present at one time, the crafting attempt will automatically fail. This is to keep people away from having the ability to AFK craft. Overhammering a red area too many times would cause the crafting of the weapon to semi-fail. The crafter would have the ability to attempt forging it again from its last temper attempt. Attempting to continue the craft from the semi-fail point would require half the necessary materials of the original recipe, just like blacksmith smelting. Now to go over crafting times and tempers. Each temper equals 5 minutes. Each tier 1 sword, aka iron sword, would take 3 tempers, aka a 15-minute crafting time. Each tier 2 sword would take 5 tempers, base tier plus 2 since it's a tier 2, which equals a 25-minute crafting time. An iron sword would need to be tempered 3 times for a successful craft. Each temper, minus the final ones, are looked at as checkpoints. So every time the weapon is tempered, of course minus the final temper, the player would be able to take a break if necessary and then resume from where they left off. Now we'll go over how upgrading enhancement works. Not enchantment, that's a completely separate profession for another day. Either way, only one stat can be increased at a time when attempting to level it up. Example, you cannot level attack speed and critical chance at the same time, even if you have the materials. In order to increase the base 4% attack speed to a 5% attack speed, the swordsmith would need to successfully craft 1 iron sword with 4% attack speed. The only way to increase to the next level is to craft the stat prior. Example, you can craft a 5% attack speed iron sword, which would unlock the ability to craft a 6% attack speed. However, crafting another 5% attack speed iron sword will not unlock 7% attack speed. The swordsmith would need to craft a 6% attack speed to unlock 7% attack speed, etc. How to smith a better weapon, in this case a sword. There are 30 total enhancement increases that can be put on each crafted sword. 5 increases times 6 different stats equals 30 enhancements. After crafting all 30 enhancements, you are then allowed to craft the next tier weapon, in this case a tier 2 sword. The higher the tier for the sword crafted is, the higher the percentages and damage caps will be. Side note, if you wanted to make a great sword like Guts from Berserk, it's still a sword. The only The only thing that the swordsmith would need is more base materials. If you want to craft a sword that is twice the size, you would need, yeah, you guessed it, twice the materials. For a great sword, you would need 3 times the materials necessary. On top of that, the larger the weapon, the higher the durability. Of course, having a great sword would have its drawbacks when it comes to swing speed and movement speed and such. On the topic of durability, a swordsmith's sword would have a higher durability than a weaponsmith's sword. Think of it like buying a $20 katana and a $2,000 katana. For anyone who knows anything about swords and weapons, you would know there's a drastic difference in terms of how well each one is made. Now we will cover the weaponsmith. The weaponsmith is someone who wants to craft a variety of weapons. They may not be top of the line, but their weapons will be capable of getting the job done. This is the weaponsmith's tree. Now you can already see there's a large difference between the weaponsmith and the swordsmith in terms of their paths of progression. The crafting time in minigames. The crafting times would be the exact same as all of the swordsmith's crafting times as stated earlier. The minigame would also be the same as the swordsmith's, with the exception of the look of the weapon being crafted and where the red areas would be. As stated before, this would keep people from picking an easier to level path. How upgrading works as a weaponsmith. The weaponsmith would need to craft 6 of each type of weapon: sword, mace, axe, dagger, and shield, totaling 30. It will cost the weaponsmith slightly more material to craft each weapon, due to the fact that they are a jack of all, master of none. However, it will take them the same amount of crafting time as a specialist. Respectively, the same amount of time it will take to be able to craft tier 2 weapons as a weaponsmith is the same amount of time it would take for a swordsmith to be able to craft tier 2 swords. Now it is time for some closing thoughts of mine. I know the first thing that everyone thinks of if you have a very universal looking system is that there's no variety. Even with a specialized system, what makes one swordsmith who is a specialized crafter different from another swordsmith? Well, since dedicated craftsmanship with this system would take a lot of time away from the adventuring aspect, a blueprint for a rare sword in the case of a swordsmith could be obtained from a dungeon, or an even rarer sword might have its blueprint torn across and scattered across the land. You would have to have people who go out all the time get for you, or in your free time you can go trying to find. As stated before, just because you are a swordsmith doesn't mean you have to only craft a one-handed sword. You could be a swordsmith who chooses to only craft great swords, challenging players to take a ride on the wild side of swordsmanship. Not only that, but each race will craft their weapons according to quote-unquote lore-wise how they were taught by their race's artisans, aka dwarves will craft a sword in a dwarven-style manner, a human will craft a sword in a human-type manner, or etc., in terms of the races there. So there's already variety in place, set in the world of Ashes of Creation. Now we come to the final and what most people would deem the most important question to answer here. Why would you want a system in a game that would take so long for crafting? When you've even stated before, that it may remove, or even completely remove, to an extent, the adventuring aspect of the game. Well, this system is designed for those true crafters out there who want to be renowned for their crafting capabilities, or just their artisan capabilities in general. It's not necessarily just crafters. Crafting in MMORPGs, like I stated before, has always been this side project, which in the long run gives them no kind of weight or meaning. This system would also be based around the idea that you would not be able to gather, process, or craft materials that are a higher tier than the current node level that you have claimed citizenship to. If you want to be the best at dungeons, you do dungeons. But if you want to be the best swordsmith, you spend your time online perfecting the art of being a swordsmith. Side note, there was an idea brought up by Organic #8563 on Discord, or his name is Organic in Discord. He had an idea about all the people's names associated with gathering and processing being also named on the crafter's finished product. So, for example, if you had a sword, the sword's tooltip would have an extended tooltip where you can see all the names of the people who had something to do with the gathering, processing, and then obviously the crafter would be a solo crafter, but you would have all the names associated with that weapon. So if you needed to gather this extremely rare ore that you needed 22 of, and only 5 at a time spawned on random days or something like that, all those gatherers' names would be there, and then those processors that had a high enough level would also have their names on there, making that item even more special, because it's not just about the crafters. And that's another problem that you have with MMORPGs, is that it only seems like the crafters are important, not the gatherers and the processors, to a certain extent. I'm not saying that they have no value in other MMORPGs, but with the system like that, it would allow you to see, oh hey, who's this guy over here? Who's this gatherer? I need more of this material. Maybe I should talk to this guy. It would just build this networking within a network, and it would be amazing. Thank you for letting me talk your ear off about my system. Again, I want to reiterate that if AoC doesn't have a system like mine, that it would be bad. It's just an idea I want to put out there. If you are behind having a system like this, or at least one closely related to it, I would love to talk to you on the AoC Discord. It is the best way to get a hold of me. I don't post YouTube videos all the time, so if you leave a comment, don't be offended if I don't respond to it. I will also be posting this video in the AoC forums. Spread the word. Thank you for your time. Take it easy.